Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fialka. Today is, what is today? The
5th.
Thank you. Somebody knows what's going on here.
I don't
June,
know about that.
June 25th, 2023. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Martin Perlich, and I mean that. Where in the heck are you calling from, Martin?
You are breaking up, Jerry. It's hard for me to hear you.
Okay, the question is, where are you calling in from?
From West Hollywood.
West Hollywood. The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Encouragement.
Oh, dude, I never get that answer. That's a good one.
Thank you.
What is your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Human voice.
That's beautiful. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Why do they gather information?
Yeah.
Because healthy humans need to expand. They understand the need to expand until they reach the divine or something like it. They know that they are not complete, and they know that they need to bring more and more information and whatever else they can bring in, sights, sounds, experience. They need to do that. They feel it.
Beautiful, Martin. You're so articulate. This is going to be fun. You get what I'm after. Do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
It's innate.
Yeah.
It's innate. We want to expand. We always want to expand. We want to be lifelong learners, as the cliche goes, but it's true. We know that we need to go to our hearts, to our Buddha, if you will. We need to go to our best self.
Do thoughts create emotions?
They can.
Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I...
That's a very good question. Until I need to answer a question for myself.
That is good. That's what, McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. And Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. But in my book, Strange Questions, I say, I don't know what I think until I ask someone else what I'm supposed to think.
That's the best one, Jerry. Best one. I say that in my interview. I say that in my book about interviewing, is that you have to ask the question that answers one of your own.
That's it.
That you have.
Yeah.
If you don't know, ask someone else.
If you don't know, ask someone else. That's the whole purpose.
You got to do it.
God is a good word. Now, can humans think without language?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Now, here's the key, Martin. Saying I don't know is completely legit here. I want you to feel you can say that. Because I ask these stupid questions doesn't mean you have to answer. In fact, Rebecca Solnit says it so well. She says, just because you ask me a question doesn't mean I have to answer it. So I'm just trying to use prompts to get us to talk. So saying I don't know is totally valid. Saying pass, I don't encourage it. But the next question is about what Chomsky said. He said that a language is not just words, it's culture, tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
Spoken language or written language or another form of communication. You have spoken language or just the formation of words or ideas?
Yeah, this is a key question too. You put the questions into the context you want. So if you want to say, yeah, when spoken language work breaks down, you're talking to another human, what do you do?
You ask another question. You alter your thinking to a place where the answer depends on your question. You
Yeah.
understand what you're missing with the first question and move to a better one, usually a refinement of the first one.
Yeah. Move to a better refined question. That's really good. I got to tell you another answer I love. Guy
Please.
said, group hug. I wish I could hug you, Martin. I miss you. Okay, so your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
It's a matter of order. Which do we do first? I think we're both, but
Yeah.
we do both. The question is, what need do we have to answer? If we need the limbic system, if we need to go fight or flight, obviously it's feeling. But if we can go to thinking, the differences between response and reaction. If you react, you're using your limbic system, you're using your emotions. If you respond, you probably have contemplated, you probably have germinated an answer. You know, that's my answer. I mean, there are two responses. I don't think there is an essence in the human being between a language, although obviously language, if you go back, many years, language developed after feelings, but we're talking about now.
Yeah, very good. See, nobody does that, Martin. They don't put it into context. They often say, here's what I get 80% of the time. We more thinking or feeling. They go, I think we're more feeling. They literally say
That's
that.
good. That's good.
That reveals a lot right there. But
Well, it's a punster who does that.
yeah, but it's also we humans invented these words, but you can't separate thinking from feeling, but we think we can because we invented the words feeling and thinking.
That wow, that's a very good one, Jerry. I have to leave you and go think about that. Go on occasionally. I
Well,
don't know. That's very good.
don't leave yet, Martin, because you'll love this one. The punchline
Oh,
is Bridget Bardot. Bridget Bardot says, "When I make love, I don't think." I'm like, good luck. Like, how do you, you know,
is she saying good luck to herself or to her partner?
I say good luck when it sounds like a high aspiration, Bridget, but I'm like, how can it's like people who meditate go, I'm gonna think about not thinking.
There you go. There you go. Meta thought.
Okay, two questions
Like,
from Alan Turing, 1950s.
okay,
Is
right.
is thinking a function of the soul?
It's a consequence of the soul. Is
Yeah,
that what your question is?
that's good.
Definitely a consequence.
Consequence of the soul.
I think.
Yeah. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
Not yet.
Yeah.
If the Musks of the world have their way, I'm afraid it will.
Wait, what's that word?
Knows
Musk? M-U-S-K?
Elon Musk.
Huh?
Elon Musk.
Oh, the
Well, I've heard
boss, Elon Musk of the world. Oh, okay. Yeah.
I've seen him say that without any question within the year. Maybe it's not within the year. I don't want to misquote him, but he says that the machines are going to conquer us. Basically,
Yeah.
he fears that. He's not going to say it's going to be on the day after Christmas, but
Yeah.
they're capable of doing it, and in the wrong hands they will, and it's inevitable that they will fall into the wrong hands.
Yeah.
That
Do
last
you?
part is mine. That's the last part is mine. Elon did not say that.
Yeah.
The wrong hands part is mine, but that's this. Let me say cynical part of me. It's a tiny part, Jerry. Let me
Right.
hasten to assure you.
We're going to get into that a lot more, but a couple more philosophical. Do
Please.
you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Meaning, fulfillment. Really, it's not the meaning. Meaning is part of. No, fulfillment is what we seek. That's what we want. That's the expansive part. Feeling and happiness and all those things are maybe incidental. They may be elements. They may be responses to the fulfillment. We're striving for fulfillment, I believe. There are people who might argue, but
Yeah.
I think so.
Well, I got it from Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He says, happiness doesn't necessarily last, but meaning tends to last longer.
Well, I don't think happiness is anything but a transient, a tickle. It's nice, but
Yeah.
it's not it won't fulfill your life. It won't
Yeah.
make you feel that you've done anything or that you have become anything. It's more important to become something.
You really get it, Martin, because see, really what this is me and you versus the wording on the question. See, I like you when people change the words and go, well, I think it's more fulfillment than the two options you gave me. So I appreciate this. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
I don't think consciousness is a thing, so I don't think that question pertains. Because
Right.
consciousness is very mobile and is very dynamic. It goes on as part of our daily life, as part of our behavior, as part of our action, part of our thought, all that.
Is it sort of like there's a phrase center without margins? Is that what consciousness is?
Wow. Whew. Who thought of that? Center without well, if that means thought without limit, maybe so. Yeah. I mean, if it can be interpreted that way, I think that's probably true. Yeah. Center without, yeah, that's good. I mean,
What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
boy, I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. I don't know if there's a way of measuring that, is there?
Well, it's hard to say. It can be in a metaphorical world or not, but
Yeah. Yeah. It could
most
be.
people say speed of light and some people say speed of thought. So,
Yeah. Well, those
um,
are the options you give them.
right. Okay, Audre Lorde, the poet, said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded and said, you can if you expose the tools.
If
What
you
new what new tool do you suggest?
woo, yeah, you should have warned me, man. Caveat Jerry. Well, what new tools did you see? Boy. Um, lysergic acid. I don't know.
Oh boy, that's good because see, just because my wording says new, it doesn't have to be a new one, but that is a good, and look at what's happened to that.
Yeah, it's a big comeback.
It's got a huge comeback. I mean, it's
Yeah,
mainstream. Every,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Time magazine, everything has it's like, whoa,
Why not?
it's beautiful.
My sister was in the original experiments at Harvard with Alpert and Leary. She had a
Wow.
class with them. Yeah. She didn't talk me into it though. I was raring to go when I heard about it.
So she's older or younger than you?
Younger. I'd already left Columbia, and she was not at Harvard. She was one of those girls' schools women's schools in Boston, Cambridge,
Yeah.
wherever.
It's a good answer. What new toy do you suggest?
Toy. Define toy.
Anything people can play with.
Well, you can't. Oh, I'm not going to answer that. What new toy did I suggest? A piano that intuits your needs.
Oh, I like that.
A piano that intuits. Actually, it could be any instrument, but a piano is an orchestra. So,
Yeah,
metaphorically, so it can, I mean, I need that because I'm such a bad pianist.
I like.
uh,
No, I like that a lot. And so, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
when I what?
What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I don't worry about anything when I go to bed at night, but I do between 5 and 6 in the morning. I get up at 5:30, 6 o'clock to meditate, and that's a hard thing to do. And then I wake my wife. I'm her alarm clock, so I wake her after my very brief meditation. So that's what I worry. I worry, oh my God. And I worry about ridiculous stuff. I worry about, oh my God, did I hurt this person's feelings, in
Yeah.
1980? Or, dumbass stuff. Did I, after having sex with this girl, after the junior prom at Shaker High, did I not call her? I never thought of how that would affect her, and now I'm thinking about it. Why on earth I'm thinking about it? All right, revisitations are okay,
It's an amazing thing where the mind wanders.
by itself. Bye, I'm going off now.
Yeah, by itself.
By itself. I'm going to contemplate my wherever.
Okay, Martin, McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might be able to learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, Martin, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Define inventions.
Oh, well, anything humans extend their humanness with. So, spoken word, printed word, electronic word, toothpicks, cell phones. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be tangible. We invented philosophy, so it's not
Right.
inventions aren't. And McLuhan called it media, but people have a different meaning of media. It's like anything humans um, extend their humanness with.
I had an answer and now I forgot it. I don't know that we invented philosophy. It may have invented us.
Right.
So I think philosophy is a tool we invented to understand things, how they work and so forth. I remember when I was in college, I took my first philosophy class, and I had never, I mean, don't believe I ever thought about philosophy before then, but I had this class with a really amazing professor. And I started reading it, and I said, good God, this is the deal. Philosophy talks about everything and understands it. It tries to understand it and tries to find its relation to other things. You don't really need to know anything if you don't know philosophy. You've got to know that. You've got to know where on the table to put the knife, or the fork, or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? If things go in a particular place and they cause each other, certainly, I always think of how things evolved. I look at the movie. How did they get that shot? Did he have to do 3 or 4 10 takes? How could he run up that hill 15 times to get the take the director wanted? Or how did a flower evolve, or whatever, the obvious things. But still, those are the important things, I think, because cause and effect is so important, and it's so difficult to determine, especially before the fact. That's what I use in my interviews.
Martin, you got it, because that's what really is McLuhan's thinking about is causality. But
Yeah.
when humans are, when the tools or the inventions shape the human, like the philosophy started to shape your thinking once you heard it, then there's hidden psychic effects to that shaping. And most people will look at things and just take them in, and they don't really know how cars shaped our behavior, or how the computer shaped our behavior. We just embrace it. So then artists kind of broadcast, hey, there's something deeper that cars and philosophy did to you. And artists sort of broadcast this, but we tend to ignore the artist broadcast. Why do we ignore it?
Why do you think we do?
You're asking me?
I am.
Oh, well, I think,
And
the
you're
answer I get 80% of the time, people say fear. They're too busy. They're too busy and they're too scared. I don't know why. I mean, I think it might be what you had, that epiphany in philosophy. Wow, this could explain the meaning of life. And I don't have time to know the meaning of life. I've got to live life.
Yeah. Well, they can be simultaneous. I think. I
Yeah.
think they have to be.
Yeah.
I think they have to be. That's what we're doing. Try to
Simul-
make. Yeah. Well, we do the best.
Simultaneity. Yeah, do the best we can. But do artists have moral obligation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I'm not afraid of ideas at all.
Beautiful. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
Can I? My earliest memory is of, yeah, I can conjure. It's looking over the end of a wall from a big ass balcony. It goes, I don't know, 100 feet deep, down to the next floor. I was born and lived my first 5 years in a tuberculosis sanatorium, and there was a children's ward beneath me, and I looked out over it one day with my mother holding me, I think, and saw these children down there, and I made a remark that was not well appreciated because it had to do with race and stuff like that. I mean, I was 3 years old or 4, I don't know, but I remember that, and I remember being lectured on how not to be, to say stuff like that. But
Wow,
okay,
that's heavy stuff. Is
that's what
memory more a curse or more a blessing?
definitely a blessing. It's
Yeah.
how you view memory that counts, not the memory itself.
Self, yes. Tell me someone within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
Well, both my parents had enormous impact on me. I could take them one at a time. My father was a physician such as doesn't, I believe, exist today. He made house calls. He brought sputum home from the office and put it in the refrigerator. He was a very good moral example. Um, I don't know. He just did things right. He tried to do things right. He wasn't like, he wasn't prancing around saying, "Look at me, I'm moral." But he taught me, his best friend was a black surgeon. Um, my parents started a community to buy houses for black people to move into our suburb, and bought houses and sold them to black people who were moving in. I'm probably as old as I look. It was the late 40s, early 50s, and black people were not welcome in suburbia. But my parents thought that was bad, and they wanted to make room for them, and they thought it was evil not to allow people because of their skin color or whatever. So my father was very moral and not a moral lecturer, not the moral high ground, and sitting in a gated community telling you what you should or shouldn't do because blah 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 blah. My mother was too. My mother was a very beautiful woman, a sort of petite Sophia Loren, who worked. She worked in my father's office. He was a doctor. She worked in his office, but she also had a job as head of volunteers at Cleveland. I lived in Cleveland, Cleveland Women's Hospital. She was head of. She was the publicist, and she ran the volunteers. So she worked, and he worked, and it was just really good. And they introduced me to classical music and to jazz, and and to cars. My father and I used to go riding in cars. He loved cars. Anyway, that's it. That's the
That
answer.
was really beautifully articulated, Martin. I really got a picture there. Now, one person outside your immediate family who had an impact on you early on, and what was that impact?
Wow. Let me think on that. Okay, I don't want to say the wrong.
It doesn't even have to be early, you know.
Okay, someone who made a big impact on me at any time in my life.
Yeah, and what was the impact?
Yeah. I would say Paul Robeson.
Wow, what a hero.
Yeah, he was.
What did you get from Paul mostly?
Well, for one thing, I got he had the courage that he had,
Yeah.
and the beautiful voice,
Yeah.
and the acting. But unfortunately, he was a Stalinist, which was I didn't realize that until later. But I didn't really care at the time. He was sort of heroic. He stood up, and he was a black man in a really truly white world of Broadway and showbiz and all that. But he really stood up, I thought, and yeah, it was a great example for me.
Beautiful. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Yes, Jewish.
Do you pray?
No, I meditate.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
He couldn't say anything to me. He could say it, but I couldn't hear it because I'd be dead. That's as simple as that. It's a physical fact.
That's fun. I've never had that answer. That's funny. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Well, there isn't such thing as evil. If nothing exists, I mean, it's an idea. Evil exists in behavior. It exists in activity. One can do something evil, and if one does evil enough, one can be called an evil person because of his activities, but not necessarily because of his innards. Now, a person could have a terrible disease, and he could act, in a way that he believes is paying humanity back for cursing him, but you don't walk down the street and see evil.
Yeah.
You could say that Hitler was essentially evil and stuff like that, but I don't know how true that is. I'm not psychologically versed enough to know what the interaction between behavior and humanity, personality is. I don't.
But Martin, the real question or a hidden question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you, Martin, advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
No, that's absolutely not right.
Yeah.
if you're talking about an enemy as someone who somehow hurts you or somehow goes against your thinking or whatever it is, whatever, I don't know how to define an enemy as such. I know it when I see it, but I hate to go directly to Buddhism because it is my thought, but it's his idea. He said, "Forgive all,
Yeah.
forget nothing."
Wow.
I think that's very powerful. I think that's like really good.
That's really heavy because it's almost like James Joyce flipped it. He says, "Remember to forget."
I have a poem that's yeah.
But Nassim Taleb says this, Martin. Games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we really don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. So my friend said villains don't think they're bad, they want control. Heroes want freedom. Bateson says if the criminal gets caught, does he go, "Oh, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day"? Or does he say, "Wow, I did something socially or morally wrong"? So it's a lot of prompts, but Martin, the basic question is, does punishment work?
In what sense, Jerry? Punishment certainly works on the physical level. I mean, a child touches a hot stove, it gets burned and learns, and that's kind of a punishment if that's what you mean. A person commits a crime and goes to jail, that works, but it doesn't work over and over and over.
Yeah.
Repeat offender is obviously not learning fast, but in time, I suppose he could learn. I don't. I'm not a good person to ask that. I don't think, because I can't answer that. I don't think I've done my best.
That's fine. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism." Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, there's an interaction between those things. Drama is basically moral preachment. Drama shows you what happens when people behave in a particular way. It's not preaching necessarily, doesn't point the finger and say, be good, but it shows you what happens when you kiss your sister or, whatever it is going to tell you. And there's an interaction between that's infinite. You learn, you do things, and I don't think that's fair. You spend your life looking at a tree. You're looking at people interacting with each other, and the dramatist is trying to tell you something about that interaction that will improve your life, that will bring you to your best self. I learned as an interviewer that that's what you were really trying to do, is to try to bring the audience through your interview subject, his or her best self.
Yeah.
What's the best you can say about this? Get up there. And you want to hear a story? I did an interview with Leonard Nimoy.
Please.
I had never watched his television show. I mean, only in passing. I wasn't that interested in it, but I really liked the cat. It was really nice. And he was a photographer, a very fine photographer. And he was having a tour of his, showing his photographs. And after the interview, it went very well. And after the interview, I was sitting in my office. I was a program director at a radio station. And I was sitting in my office thinking, wow, I really feel good, man. Why do I feel so good? And this little voice came, because you did a good interview, schmuck. You did, you did your job. And what does that mean? Well, it means you brought the best out of your interview subject. How did you do that? It just kept going. It wouldn't end. It's like you just never end, with questions. I brought the best out of myself. I brought the best out of myself to reach out from my heart to his with a question that will bring his best self out, because that's what the audience needs to hear. Whether they
Yeah.
want to hear that or not, they want to know how long his dick is, or what he did
Yeah.
with some starlet or whatever. But if you want people to listen to you more than one time, you're going to go past gossip, and you're going to ask people, what's your highest point? Where is your Buddha? Where is your God? Where's your Jesus? Whatever it is that you believe, and that's what I try to do. I tried to
Yeah.
be a person that encouraged other people. If I had
So
a purpose in life, that was it.
yeah, no, so beautifully put, because that's why I've studied your interviews and you've been an inspiration for my interviewing. And it's sharing
Really?
conversation, and it's not just you and the person being interviewed, it's the entire world who can hear it. If they're live, that's really important. In
That's the
fact,
most
the
important thing.
the dick thing was funny because I tried to interview Pamela DeBars for years, and we knew each other through the Zappa world, and she wouldn't answer my emails. And then she had a, a, a garage sale, and I walked into her house and I talked to her on a one-to-one person level, and I says, I've been trying to interview you for you. She goes, well, I usually turn them down because all they want to know is how big Jimmy Page's dick is. And I goes, I'm not going to ask that. But she eventually did the interview in front of an audience, and it really did go well. So that's sharing.
Sure. I'm sure. Yeah.
So I know your book tells you the story of you becoming an interviewer. So I don't want to
Mhm.
go over things you've already said and written about, but I'm curious as a writer, because Martin, really, you study journalism, writing.
No, I
You're a
never.
writer, you're a poet, you're an author. What was the tipping point? You're growing up reading. What's the tipping point where you go, I want to write poetry. I want to be write journalism. I want to write. Where's the tipping point where you says, that's my calling?
Whew. First of all, I never studied journalism. I never studied writing either. Um, I I don't want to go too deep in this, but my failing, I know my life failing, which is to value spontaneity more than precision, or no, not more than precision, more than perfection. I want to capture the spirit of the moment in me, in the world, whatever. I want to capture that. Whatever comes to me first, not that I won't rewrite, I will. But
Yeah.
uh, if you don't capture the spontaneity, and that's what I was in radio all those years, I tried to be fresh. I never scripted anything. I did take notes occasionally to just try to remember, where someone so conducted something or played, with Charlie Parker or whatever. But no, I didn't study. It was never studied, and I know that my problem was playing too fast and loose with my talent. That I just said, "Fuck it," I'm going to write it. Boom, and I don't think that's respectful enough of the art itself and of the possible audience. But my stuff worked out pretty well. My novels were pretty good, and my poetry has been praised. Um, I'm trying to think of the answer to this. When did I know that I had to be a writer? I never really did until I started writing. And I didn't start writing until I was an old motherfucker, just an old
At
guy.
what age did you start writing?
You don't want to know, because then you'll figure out how old I am.
Dude, I know it's in your Wikipedia page. Anyone can see you're born 2 years before Finnegan's Wake came out. But I mean,
That's
you
a good
were
mark.
right. Yeah, it is. But you were. What did you write first? Fiction, novels, or poetry? Which one came first?
Well, fiction and novels are pretty much the same thing. I never wrote nonfiction. I never was a
Right.
reporter. I did write a couple of columns when I was still in Cleveland, but they were horrible. Um, they were about music and stuff. I was a music critic for a while, but it was terrible. Um, what did I write first? I wrote a book called there was this record store chain called, believe it or not, Licorice Pizza. That I know it became a movie, but
Yeah.
there's a store, and the guy that owned it commissioned me to write a pamphlet basically for his clerks because they were going to add classical music, and I had been on a classical music station for a while, and he said, "Okay, write what they should know about this, that, the forms and times, composers." So I started writing it. It was called "Roll Your Own Beethoven: A Punk's Guide to the Classics," and I wrote it. That was 1973. So I wrote that then, and it wasn't too bad. I sent it to my old music professor. That was a mistake, and he came back with this very well, but so Edward Evans, I loved the man, but I don't. It was the hippie period, and roll your
Yeah.
own. Everyone was smoking weed. Not that they're not now, but
Right.
they were doing it then. You probably heard that. Anyway, what was the question?
Well, you said so after you wrote the booklet in 73, then did you start
Oh,
writing? That's
no,
when you wrote your
no,
your
no,
novel? Your first novel
no,
is what
no,
year?
no. Oh God. Um, wow. 2000 and something, man. I didn't write until I was an old cat.
Right. And then when you started writing poetry around 2000 as well?
Here's what happened.
Yeah.
Uh, my wife is French, and she had a place in Corsica, which is an island, French island off the southern coast of France. And I would go over there and write. And I wrote a couple of novels over there. The Wild Times and Self Pity Chronicles were written over there. And I then wrote another book called the Perfect Fool, which was about myself. And I came back with a manuscript and I gave it to my intellectual property lawyer, and he said it was a really good novel. He's also a writer and a critic, and he said it's a really good novel. It's as good as anything I've seen at this stage in development, but you can't publish it. And I said, why not? He said, well, the character so and so is too much like the real one. I said, how do you know the real one? She said, I know the family. So he said, you go home and change that character. I said, well, that's not very easy to do. And so I went home and I tried to, and I built a French character, a girl. It didn't work. And so I sort of gave up, and I said, you can't give up. That's not your way. Or I hope it isn't your way. So what is my way? Well, I'm not going to write a cookbook. I'm not going to write short stories because I don't know how. So what's short? What can I do? So I started writing poetry. And
Oh, that roadblock.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah,
Amazing. That
yeah. And it came out pretty well. And you know, some good people liked my poetry and encouraged me. And encouragement is the deal, man. That's what we're supposed to be doing with each other, helping each other to live in a way that's more satisfying and more fulfilling to them. You know, uh, yeah, that's
it's
what.
such a good word, Martin. You started with encouragement. So
Yeah.
let's go to this. A screenwriting teacher told me a great film or great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're writing a poem?
It only plays one role, Jerry, and that is why do you want to write the poem?
Yeah.
And there are various reasons. Primary amongst them is a great line that you read someplace or a great topic that you want, like truth. We live in a society that lies all the time. Lies, 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 lies.
Yeah.
Almost nothing is true. from advertising to propaganda to politics to anything. If you find something that's true, grab it or buy it or whatever you have to do to take it home with you. You know, to me, and I've written, I don't know, 10 poems about truth. About, you know, I don't attack things in my poetry. I don't write that kind of poetry. I'm not an activist. But although I was a Marxist very early in life, um, and in certain ways I still am. But my poetry is basically lyric poetry. It has a certain philosophical bent, but it's basically about love of the world, love of words, love of whatever you can love, or anything that'll hold still, you know.
Well, Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your reader when you're writing your poem?
Ooh, another good question. How much am I thinking of the reader? The only time I really think of my reader is A, I don't know the reader, but B, I think of him or her when I let myself go off in a sort of burst of wordplay or, you know, alliteration, or I love to fart around with the words. And I know that it could be diverting, it could be fun, and I try for that. But I worry. I think about my reader. I worry that he's going to say, "Get over it, motherfucker." You know, who needs this? You know, get on with the story. You know, we don't want to hear this. So yeah, I think I worry about them at that point. Or
You
when I
know, yeah,
what?
Martin, I got to interject the Zappa. You know, Frank would go, I don't think of my listener. I write this stuff for myself, but if they like it, that's a bonus. And I think that's Frank over romanticizing the creative process, because he knew if he wrote this song and said this word and hit these notes, that kids would buy his music and then he could make more music. But do
Yeah.
you think that, because I mean, you interviewed him 8 times, do you think he was over romanticizing, saying he writes for himself and not his listener?
Well, I think people that make that, it's kind of an assumption, but it's also a misunderstanding of what they're doing, because you're
Yeah,
always writing for yourself and others. You
and
can't.
others.
Absolutely impossible to take the other person out of the equation or yourself out of the equation. I mean,
Yeah.
what
And
is
then
the
you
of that?
you brought up the word truth. I love it, because Louis Buñuel says, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it. Now,
Well said.
most people Most people love that. They go, that's so right. And one guy finally said, that's bullshit. Because if I'm going to seek something, it's because I want to find it. So the cliche goes, the journey is more important than the destination. Why do we have to name or seek a destination if the journey's more important?
Well, like most things, that's bullshit. I mean, like most things, it's so, and people don't use the word simplistic correctly. Things are simplistic when they are too simple. Simplistic means that you're oversimplifying something. And if you ask which is more important, yeah, there's a balance. You know,
Yeah.
things are in the balance, and they're all elements are they play off each other. You know, they influence each other, and they bang heads with each other and all that. So you can't say one is more important than the other. You can, but I think many times, let's put it that way, it's a distortion. Maybe, you know, it goes one way or the other in a particular artwork. You know, I don't know. That's the best. That's the closest I can get to it.
No, that was beautiful. And Martin, it's funny because Louis Bersani studied the symbolist poet Mallarmé, he said, the very crises which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic composition. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that. And I know the word crises and threatens might not be quite the word, but it's like the very task of writing poetry sustains poetic composition. Any thoughts on that line?
One more time, Jerry. I'm sorry.
Yeah. The way he read it is the very crises which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic composition.
Well, if you're the right kind of poet, that's true. If you rise to a challenge, let's say a crisis is a very strong challenge. Okay, unless it's COVID. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, I mean, if it's a challenge, that's I think most artists, and I don't think of myself as an artist that in any way I'm a writer. That's not an artist. I don't think there are artists. There are writers who are artists. Certainly, people like James Joyce and so forth, who are without any question, the obvious Shakespeare, Proust, those guys. We all know that, and I'm just spinning. I've talked myself out of the question.
Well, that's good. Let's go on because we'll come back around in poetry. McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness, like knife and fork extends our teeth. The shutter in a camera extends our eyelid. Maybe philosophy or religion's extension of consciousness. What humanness do you extend with the writing utensil? Whether it's a pen or a keyboard, what does that extend? What humanness does it extend for you?
The heart.
Yeah.
The heart.
Yeah.
Heart, I like the word encourage because it has, I don't want to sound too academic, but it has the word coeur in it, the French word for heart, corazon, cuore, all those words mean heart. And they mean, honesty,
right,
integrity, whatever, the courage to tell the truth, the courage to go forward, hoping to find truth and to bring it to other people. I think that's really as important as anything else there is. If you encourage other people need encouragement. I do. God,
it's amazing.
You
don't think of the word encouragement has love in it. I think it had the word courage, but courage comes out of heart too, right? Out of love.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Of course it does. Yes, of course.
Amazing.
Because you love other people, and that story I told you about Nimoy is what it is. In order to get someone else, to bring his heart out, you got to bring our own. There's a thing about karma that is another well overused and misunderstood word. My understanding of it, this is not all Buddhists think this, but the key part of karma in any case is the fact that you have to get your own heart. It's a certain sense, self-indulgent, self-centered. You bring the best out of yourself to go to Leonard Nimoy or whoever it is, Frank Zappa, and you're there. You're feeling your heart, so you don't have to go any further. But in order to get to him, to get to Zappa, I think the reason Zappa liked me was that I was very honest. I was very, I didn't kiss his ass.
Yeah,
and I cared enough. My meeting with Zappa was like one of the most encouraging things to me that ever happened. The fact that he called me for interviews when he needed, to publicize something was a wonder to me. That Frank Zappa would call me,
No, that's beautiful. It says a lot about you. And it also, you evoke Eden Abe, the man who wrote the song Nature Boy, with the lyric. The greatest thing you'll ever learn is to love.
It's just love and be loved in return.
Yep.
Thank you, Nat Cole.
Yeah. And the killer thing is, because I am a Venice, California historian, and I deal with the homeless a lot, is I go, be careful who you kick off the boardwalk because they're homeless. Because Eden Abez was homeless, and he lived on the boardwalk in Venice, and he wrote the greatest love song ever with a lesson
ever. Ever. Absolutely. Other than Schubert, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
no, that's a
Leonard,
great song.
yeah, Leonard Cohen's a pretty good songwriter too. He says the only way you can sell a concert is to put yourself at risk. And if you don't do that, people know. What role does risk play in your creative process?
Great question. Risk. Risk. Well, I think that with me, the whole deal is risk
Yeah.
because I'm nobody, man. I'm, maybe I'm a disc jockey or something like that. But when I write, I'm daring the universe to say, "Who are you to write? What are you? Who wants to listen to you? You're nobody. All that." I overcome that in order to write. In any case, I don't overcome permanently. That's the risk. The risk is
That's
you say, what?
yeah.
What? You? Why are you writing? And what is it? Who cares about your life? That's the risk to me is rejection.
Yeah.
Wilhelm Reich said, since we're quoting things, the basic impulse is fear.
Yeah.
That the things we do are to cover our fear, to dissolve our fear, to divert our actions from our fear. I don't know. That's not.
Yeah.
That
No,
comes.
you're anticipating a lot, Martin, because I get into Wilhelm Reich and this whole thing about risk was important.
Yeah.
But I have to go back to when you said that the writing utensil extends the heart. I wanted to ask you, what does radio extend? What humanness?
Well, the simple answer is that it's, the understanding of sound and the
Yeah,
understanding of words and all kinds of things that every other art extends as well. But radio does it, of course, in its own way.
yeah,
And, you know, that it's the same. Unfortunately, our radio has become, what has become a commodity of certain kinds. Not that everything else hasn't
yeah.
commoditized itself as well or been commoditized, but I don't know, radio. Huh. What do
No, that
you?
was good, Martin, because I wanted to tell you just because I interviewed a great radio guy the other day and I says, and he specializes in talk radio. And I says, what does radio extend? And he said, arms, the hands and the arms, because I reach out and hug my audience. And I says, that's amazing because when they asked McLuhan, what does film extend? He said, the foot, because you travel. So, it goes into very, it can go wherever you want. It's like
Yeah,
metaphorical and not. But I
yeah,
really have to
yeah.
go back to your love of spontaneity and how much you value spontaneity. I didn't get to tell
Yeah.
you this. That's like Ginsburg and so many of them said first thought, best thought.
Yeah, right.
But when I
It's
worked
fresh
for
joy.
George Carlin, he said, we got a flyer in the mail. It had nothing to do with George, but someone sent us this flyer for some workshop, and it said, I'm trying to get more control over my spontaneity. Which is a great paradox. And this is like
Wonderful. It's wonderful.
it leads into Viola Spolin. She was a social worker in Chicago who did these role-playing workshops and spawned Second City and Saturday Night Live. It's an amazing where that came out of. And
Wow.
she said, if the audience cannot see your struggle to achieve something, they cannot root for you to achieve it. What role does struggle play in your creative process?
Ooh, struggle. Well, not to be phony profound, but life is struggle, of course.
Yeah,
And to understand life, art has its role. It may not be a major role or the major role, but it has a role, and that's struggling to be understood and to communicate with other people. I always want to do the absolute best I can. I want to find the word. When I was writing my first book, which was never got published either, what was it called? Art is the Science of the Soul. That was my first book. It was a novel. I don't think it was terribly good, but I was writing. I was living in Los Feliz and sitting out on my back porch, and I was writing this book, and I couldn't get the right word. On the occasion that I couldn't get the right word, or the right paragraph, or whatever it was, and I had this vision of a drill going into my head, boring down into my brain, and it got to a certain level, and the word that I was looking for popped up, and it was always, Jerry, always the right word. It was the word that I wanted, or the paragraph or the sentence. And furthermore, upon reflection, I realized it was the absolute, well, that the deeper I dug, the better the word. Not just, yeah, precision is the deal. You want to get the absolute best word, the absolute shortest way of saying things. Brevity really is the soul of art. It is really.
It
you
is.
don't want to be
Yeah.
You want to be bam, bam. Not hitting. I'm not saying percussive or painful or anything. I'm just saying you want to get that word, not that one. And I think it's you're showing respect to your audience by just not taking all their time. It's when I was on the air, I would talk as little as possible. I
Yeah.
would figure out a short way to say everything and not talk very long, a minute or so. Not meaning my interviews, but, and by the way, this is one of the very first times I've been interviewed. I've written a book called The Art of the Interview. So, because I did, do you know that my interview, oh, there it is. Well, good for you. That's Isaac Stern and Leonard Rose, a cellist, and Eugene Stoneman, a great pianist. But my interviews, by the way,
And who's the guy with the microphone there, shoving the mic in the guy's face? That's a great shot.
That's me with my tongue in my cheek, I think. No, I should put a plug in for myself. My my interviews, 360 some of them are on the UCLA Digital Library. They usually actually bought my my interviews and put them up on their digital library or digital whatever it is. So if you want to see or hear them, they're up there. And my first one was Leonard Bernstein.
Yeah.
And yeah, Leonard Bernstein.
Your library is immense and so rich and so important. But that brevity thing, Martin, was cool because it really evoked Bucky Fuller. Less is more. But I spoke with the filmmaker Michael Apted 40 years ago. I says, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? And most people don't know Abel Gance invented rapid montage in Paris in France in 1922. But in 1980, it really flourished with MTV to the point that Marty Scorsese said, I cut my films faster because of MTV. So what Michael Apted said is, because we've learned to take in information faster. And I asked this question with the bias. Can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
Depends on what you think of taking information. What does that mean, really?
Yeah.
The length. I mean, everything has to do with the question or the event or whatever it is that you're taking in. Depends on how you're set up. Depends on how the question is asked. All of those things. But all things being equal, I guess, yes, we can. But again, I go back to Reich. If you're fearful, your attention span, as it were, or whatever it is going to be short because, you can be anxious, or you can be fearful or afraid. Like if you're chased by a bear, you're not going to be listening to people telling you, slow down or whatever. You're not going to be, you're fearing things that I don't know. I don't think this is going anywhere in that sense. Maybe, but my larger point is it depends on a lot of other things. I guess I've
No,
been.
it was well put, and I'm all open for the anecdotes and stories are what flush out your meaning, being chased by a bear. But go back to that. What do you think the motive of the cave artist was?
Whoa, beautiful question. The motive, yeah. Ooh. Well, it has to be didactic. It has to be trying to communicate something with this tribe. It really has to, or his fireside folks. Why else would he do it? I
Yeah.
mean, he wasn't thinking of an exhibit. He wasn't thinking of making some bucks. Maybe he was. I don't know, but I would guess it was to say, stay away from this kind of buffalo. Stay away from this kind of beast.
Yeah.
I don't know. Don't jump in the fire. I don't know. That's a really good question. It's really hard to answer. I don't know. You simply
Well,
don't.
well, Martin, it's interesting because experimental filmmaker Alice Frampton said, narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. Can you forget to die?
Can you forget to die? Well, that's obviously a metaphor. No one can forget to die. I mean, the only way to forget to die, no, there's no way. The only thing you can do with death is provoke it, or, court, pay at court. I don't know.
Yeah.
Forget to die, forget to die. Wow. I mean, it's too heavy for me, man. I don't know.
I'm glad you said the word metaphor because all these cute quotes I drop, the whole point I learned from McLuhan is to reword them or take them a step further. Don't just settle what sort of aphorism tells you, but how can you reinvent it? And so McLuhan took Robert Browning. Our reach should exceed our grasp, or what is heaven for? And Marshall said, our reach should exceed our grasp, or what is a metaphor?
Nice,
Isn't
nice,
that great?
nice. Yeah, he was such a great spirit.
What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Uh, I think that's a false decision. I don't think I can. Well, I mean, there are no real victories. There's just trade offs.
Yeah,
You
that's
give up,
good.
you win something, you give off something. You have to give it up to win something else. And it can always be one thing's better than the other.
Yeah.
You can always, but I think I don't know.
No, that's Balzac said, behind every great fortune, there's a crime.
Depends on how you define crime.
And so you touched on this, Martin. This is really important for me. I'll tell you the history of the question after. It goes like this. You've accomplished a lot. How do you rate these three elements in your accomplishments? Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Well, to avoid undue modesty or false modesty, um, luck, what, and ambition? What's the
Luck, skill, and
skill?
ambition. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think they're all the same thing. I think if they
Yeah.
all go together as the same thing.
No, that's fine. Leave it at that because I'll tell you the history. I asked for 30 years, is ambition based more on fear or joy? Which I got a lot of these questions early on from you, and that one I got from Christine McKenna. People who interviewed before, I would just use their questions. And so when I asked, is ambition based more on fear or joy? 80% of people would say fear. And then I read Friedkin, the director of Exorcists, and he goes, in Hollywood, skill and luck have nothing to do with it. It's all ambition.
Bravo. Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
There's a poet who said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Well, if that's a metaphor, then I'll deal with it after I say obviously English. But my inner dialogue is between fear and the response to fear. Really, I know that's really creepy, but yeah, that's what it is.
No,
I'm afraid of this, so I'll do something else.
yeah, no, that's a good answer. I appreciate your down to earthness. You're being very real. In fact, two of my film heroes say, well, George Manupelli says, ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says, there is no self expression. And Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
Self-expression is bullshit. I don't. Who cares?
Yeah.
The other thing is very important.
Yeah.
The transmission, as I say, of courage. I just, get out there and do it, man. That's about all that you can tell our lady.
That's it.
I want on my if I don't get cremated, I want on my gravestone, he did what he could.
Yeah.
That's all. He used his skills or his talent or whatever to maximum effect, I guess.
Yeah. Hello, you've touched me deeply. It's worked, Martin. Can art making be egoless?
Again, I don't know what ego means. That's really a problem. I mean, the Freudian ego, common language ego, television rom-com ego. I don't know. Does it mean arrogance? Does it mean I don't know?
Yeah.
I think that's what the question sort of means.
Well, here's I'll tell you the history of the question too, because 90% of people say no. And then a year ago, a woman said, great art is egoless. And then a month ago, a woman said, great art or art has to be egoless. So it's hard because someone said a couple of weeks ago, they go, do you mean ego in the bad sense? Because, the funny follow-up question is, was Freud right?
Well, I was a Reichian because I was a Marxist at one time, and so was Wilhelm Reich for a very long time.
Yes,
he was. When I was a Trotskyist, which is a hated word among Marxists, I guess.
Yeah,
but we sort of idolized Trotsky as the great example of what man can be, because he created the Red Army, and at the same, which was thank you for winning World War II, and was a literary critic. So this is not a bad combination, if you think of ambition, to to do those two things, combine them, and say good night, folks.
Yeah.
I did what I could, you know.
Yeah.
If someone
Well,
won't drive an ice pick through my head, I'll be all right.
oh my God, you have total ESP, because when you were talking about that drill in your head,
Yeah, you thought of Trotsky?
well, I thought of Frank Zappa's line, ice pick in the forehead, because
Ooh.
I don't know that from Trotsky. I know it because Frank put Frank described Johnny Guitar Watson's guitar solos as ice pick in the forehead.
Oh,
And then we learn where he got that, which is the Trotsky world. So it
was
was,
it really?
yeah.
That's interesting to hear. Let's finish this with. Are we almost finished? We should talk about Frank.
Well, no, we got 15 more minutes if you can. I mean, we can go longer than 15 if you can hold up.
Well, let me pour some water.
Do what you need to do, because I would love to go another 15, 20 if we could.
Oh, cool. Yeah, sure.
Okay,
I'm enjoying this a lot. You're asking great questions.
Let me jump into Frank, because this is an important question that follows what we're just talking about.
Well, okay.
Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness that you turned into a strength.
Well, I think it's just the big picture. Society scares us. Functioning in society is, job one, and overcoming that is not the answer. You can't overcome it. You've got to work within it. You've got to mold it to your purposes, and your purposes must be something that helps society. You have to turn it back on itself and make of it, use it as the raw materials for your life and for the gift that you give humanity. The help that you get is not a gift. I mean, but it's some kind of help, some kind of advice, some kind of vision, some kind of, something they didn't have before that'll help them.
Well, I hear say it all the time, and it sounds cliche or Hallmark cardy, is we're here to make the world a better place.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, that's simple. But
Yeah.
Utah Phillips said anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
Each individual.
Yeah.
And then should we ever find one, an enlightened leader, should one ever appear?
Yeah.
God knows, God, we hope. Spero. I wanted to tell you how I met Frank, though.
Please go ahead, Martin.
I came to LA in 1972 from Cleveland, where I had been something of a success in radio. And I went on KMET, which was the hottest station on the West Coast in those days. It was just absolutely brilliant. What was called prog rock. Do you remember progressive rock and roll?
Yep.
It was called prog rock. Anyway, I was on there with the obscene Stephen Clean and Mary Turner, who just died, and those guys, I was only there for a couple of weeks, and I'd done one or two interviews. I did Lou Reed and that guy who did great tattoos. He did Janis Joplin's Rose. I can't remember. I think his name was Lloyd. Really nice guy. And the promotion man at Columbia had heard that interview, I guess. And he came up to the station and he said, would you like to interview Frank Zappa? And I said, would I? Jesus Christ, I'm losing status at my high school, So yeah, hot rats, man. Let's go. So, I guess the guy thought I had been there a long time. He didn't know that I was there for like 2 or 3 weeks. So he asked me, and he drove me up to the top of Laurel Canyon. And as you know, Frank lived on Woodrow Wilson up there.
Yeah,
Am I right? Yeah.
correct.
So we stood at the door, we rang the doorbell, and Frank came out, and the guy says, "This is Martin. He wants to interview you." And he looked at me, you. So he said, uh, "What are you going to ask me? What kind of gum I chew or whatever he's going to say." And I said, "No, I want to talk to you about Webern and Stockhausen and the 12 tone, whether you think Boulez." And he said, "For a teenage radio program?" I said, "Does that mean you can't answer the question, Frank?" "Come on in," he said. So in I went, and that was the first of 8 interviews I did with Frank. His loss is like one of the great, great, great losses to humanity. I think he was the best satirist of the 20th century. I don't know all of them, of course, but of the ones that I knew, he was amazing. And I did him. My first interview was Leonard Bernstein, and I did Frank Zappa 8 times. And I think, forget anything else. Zappa and Bernstein, that's a good century. That's a good century. And that's a good record of doing interviews. So, when Frank would come off the road and he would call me, and he would say, or he have his people call me, and play for me. He did a lot of live recording, as I'm sure you know, and he would play his recordings for me. And here I'm sitting in Zappa's, I don't know what it was, basement or
Yeah.
listening room, and he'd be playing these incredible tunes. This band played live better than any band I've ever heard. Maybe Benny Goodman or something like that, but it was just amazing. And I was sitting next to him, and I said, "I'm sitting next to Frank Zappa, listening to his music. How in the hell did I get here? Does he know what a piece of shit I am? Does he know what a creep? Does he know how much I think this is like the pinnacle of my life?"
That's funny. Does he know what a piece of shit I am? I mean, that was the beauty of Frank. He really respected everyone, but he came off as a satirist. So even that all these documentaries on him are pretty atrocious. They try hard, but one of them says he attacked people. He didn't attack people. That's what satire is.
No.
In fact, one of the great lines I've ever heard is Frank satirized what he loved the most. So that goes along, but I was going to ask you, how did Frank shape your behavior?
Wow. Well, I love the word encourage, but I thought of this before I remembered that I liked the word encourage. But what he did was encourage my best impulses.
Yeah.
He encouraged my critical thinking.
Yeah.
Here is this brilliant man, and he's doing what I aspire to. He's encouraging me to continue the things that I love to do most, and that is listen to very modern music and make fun of the things that need making fun to, baby snakes or whatever it is, and to continue to play his music on the radio. I had a show in Cleveland called the Perlich Project, which was me and Bob Fass at WBAI in New York, Captain Midnight. We were the first couple of people that did that kind of music. We played Mozart or Glenn Gould playing Bach, and then Allen Ginsberg reading, and then Frank, something like that. And we would play just anything that was good, and we would want people to hear. And that was the deal with the best people. I'm not calling myself the best people. I'm calling myself someone that was guided by the best people. Trying to reach out to people and say, no, you're better than this, or just be your best self, or whatever it was. And that sounds preachy, I know. But all of this comes from looking back I didn't do it at the time. I didn't say, now be a good example for people.
Yeah.
Just play great shit because you want to listen to it, and you want to share it with people, and you think it's your job. That's what you're here for, is to bring out the best in people, in yourself, the whole deal. But Frank absolutely inspired me, continued to inspire me. But I must tell you one negative thing. It's not about Frank. It concerns Frank. I did a number of interviews with the avant-garde composer Pierre Boulez
Yeah.
over the years, 2 or 3 interviews. And one time I interviewed him at UCLA where he was giving a concert. He was also a conductor. And I asked him about it. He had recorded 2 Angel LPs of Zappa's music, orchestral music. And I asked him about that. And it was so disappointing. He just sort of pooped all over it. He said, sort of, oh no, because I thought, the presence of excellence would unite people. I thought,
Yeah.
This should inspire you. Why did you record it in the first place?
Yeah.
You didn't make an album of Beatles covers.
Yep.
It wouldn't have been bad if you did, but it's a different level of stuff, But
Well,
yeah,
in retrospect, Martin, it's like these people in the context. I've heard various things of the Boulez and Frank, and we saw them. When David Raskin had them both on stage at UCLA, and they did a dialogue. Blah blah blah. It can go deep, and you can psychoanalyze all these different relationships Frank had over the years. But what you said is one of the most important things I've heard over the years, is that Frank brought out of people what they didn't even know was in them, or he gave them that means. It wasn't that he was ripping people off. He was just,
I don't know.
he was collaborating, and he knew how. Spencer, the drummer for Jefferson Airplane, said, dude, he's the only one who's fucking thinking and not drugged out. He's a smart guy. He's the spokesman,
He never did drugs. He never did drugs that I am aware of.
Right. But your history with FM radio is immense, because we had you on that panel discussion at Beyond Baroque many years ago about, you're one of the founders and the key icons in the history of FM radio, Bob Fass, the guy in San Francisco, all you people were doing this. It was a zeitgeist. It was happening all at once.
It was. Yeah. No, I don't want to be any leader. I was just in that movement. And I was on a classical music station. I did a show I was running a chain of record stores. And I did a show that basically sold records for my store. It was called The Audition Booth, and I play classical music every Sunday night, and hoping to, I'd say it's available at the discount records store of your choice. Anyway, on that station, I was also the intermission host of the Cleveland Orchestra broadcast, and Cleveland Orchestra was a mofo at that time. It was killer.
Yeah.
And I said I want to do the show, and I play all this different kinds of music, and they let me do it. I couldn't believe they would. It was wild ass music too. So. Well,
Martin, I want to ask you a couple more questions, and we're out of here. But we should do a part 2 where we just talk about music, and have it thematic. But here's something Frank said in the LA Free Press in 1969. And they said, Frank, you mentioned Pauline Oliveros creating a mass with the sound above the audio and below. And Frank said, not that it created a mass, it created something audible. It produced a some indifference tone, which happened to be located within the audible frequency range. So combining something so high you couldn't hear it and so low you couldn't hear it yields something in the middle that you could hear. Whether or not you like what you heard in the middle is another question. The concept is brilliant. So here's Frank talking about Pauline Oliveira's Some Indifference Tone. Any comment on that idea?
Boy. Only that Frank was a mofo. He was just, he was all over it, man. He was, and he wasn't being the smart aleck. He wasn't saying, see how I can be.
No.
Not at all. He was just, it seemed to me he was very sincere, and that his stuff, well, you could tell his stuff was, it defined excellence at a time when it was difficult to find, Now that was a great period of music at the pop level, the Jefferson Airplane and all those people were really good. But Frank, hey, he defined a whole other level. We know that.
Yeah.
And,
Well, in engaging people in satire, Jonathan Swift's compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. And Frank really reinforced it by saying, watch the Nazis run your town. Now go home and check yourself. You think we're singing about somebody else.
well,
Frank, he really embraced satire. Like, you got to love the cops as they beat the shit out of you on the street. That is an amazing line with Black Lives Matter. What can we do but love the cops? Or one of Frank's heroes, Lenny Bruce. You name cops 3 things: cops, pigs, or peace officers. Well, why not just call them peace officers? Because that's what William Blake taught us. You in what you embrace, you become what you embrace.
It's true.
So let's so in closing out here, Martin, I wanted to ask you, what gives you the most optimism?
My wife's smile.
Oh my God, that is so touching. How many years you been together?
23.
That is beautiful.
We're not really married. I'm not giving that away, but we're the modern live together couple, and
Yeah. That is so
yeah,
beautiful. I love that.
she's a
And
lovely woman.
I wanted to ask you, what question remains unresolved for you?
Well, will we ever be able to build a society that is life positive?
Yeah.
I mean, this country has been the best in history, but I'm afraid it's going down at the moment. And if we could build a country that was America in let's say 75 or so, I don't know. There was a pinnacle there when we were what we thought we were. That would be most optimistic. Was the question about optimism?
Yeah, what gives you the most
Yeah.
optimism? Yeah.
Yeah.
If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Pay attention.
Yeah. Here's 5 quick Alan Watts questions just off the top of your head in a few words. Number 1, who started it all?
Well, I don't know.
2, are we going to make it?
I very much doubt it. Very much.
3, where do we put it?
In our hearts.
Beautiful. 4, who's cleaning it up?
Each of us individually.
Beautiful. 5th one is it serious?
Is the panic serious?
Wait, dude, you're answering a question with a question. You win, Martin. That's what this series is all about. They ask Irish people, why do you guys answer questions with questions? And they go, we do, eh?
Bravo.
How do you find peace of mind?
Enjoyable.
Yeah, that's good. So I wanted to tell you, you know, the first question, what's the best thing for a human being? You said encouragement. Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being. Good. So it's been such a pleasure spending this time with another human being, especially because it's you, Martin, my hero. And you know, my last question is usually, what gives you the most optimism? That's what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. And he said, other people.
Wow.
So, you know, that's it. It's all about sharing with each other. And thank you for your time and energy here, Martin. What
Thank you very much, Jerry. Thank you for inviting me.
It's beautiful. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope we can keep talking forever and ever.
You're a doll. Thanks, Jerry. Mwah.
Thank you. Love you, Martin.
Love you.